What is up, everybody? Thanks for stopping in this video. Hope everything's going good wherever you happen to be. Today we're going to be reading this article about Lia Thomas. Lia Thomas NCAA championship performance gives women's sports a crucial opportunity to become a man's sport. Anyone who cares about the advancement of sports and women's sports in particular should celebrate her win. No, I don't think I will. I don't think I agree with you. On Saturday, University of Pennsylvania swimmer Lia Thomas placed last in the 100-yard freestyle swim during the NCAA championships, ending her career in the collegiate swimming, and last place showing at an NCAA swim meet, even a championship one, would not typically garner national headlines, yet Thomas has been at the center of controversy regarding her eligibility to compete in women's events. Okay, so she placed last in the 100-yard freestyle. I believe the 500 freestyle is her event, and she's the national champion at that. So I don't know exactly what they're trying to say. Yeah, last place isn't what we're concerned about here. And I just have a feeling that Lia Thomas can let off the throttle. She's the only competitor, I read in another article, she's the only competitor to swim slower than her qualifying time. So who knows, with all of the headlines that Lia Thomas has been getting, with all the attention, maybe Lia Thomas is like, you know what, I'm going to lose this one. It's not even my race. I'm still going to the Olympics. It doesn't even matter. I'm already a champion. I don't need to be a champion at the 100 too. I'm going to let my teammates be champion at that. How much you want to bet that's what went down? But yeah, let's spin it like, oh, she placed last. Why are people concerned about that? A trans woman placing last. No big deal. No. When she won, she smashed the competition by like a minute 30. The controversy came to an apex last week at the NCAA championships when she became the first openly trans athlete to win a Division I championship. Oh, okay, that's what we're talking about then. Not that she placed last in the 100. It's that she won the national championship at the 500 freestyle. That's what we're talking about. Okay. For anyone who cares about the advancement of sports, and we already read that, she should be embraced in the history of progress that sports represent and recognized as the trailblazer that she is. I don't think so. I do not think she's a trailblazer. And I think she's a cheater. I think he's a cheater. Women's sports are situated at a paradoxical intersection wherein sex segregation is upheld through claims of biological difference. Let me rephrase that. Through statements of fact about biological difference. Yet equality is prefaced on being treated the same and given the same opportunities as men. Yes, it is. And the same opportunities as men to win championships, to have your own races, to win your own medals. Because if you weren't to separate the sports, it would be a very, 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 very rare occurrence, if ever, that a woman would become a starter in the NBA, would be on the Olympics for swimming. So if you want to give women an equal chance and have it be equal, then we shouldn't have men and women compete against each other. It's really that simple. It's been that way for a long time. It's easily recognizable to anyone with half a brain when you look at Lia Thomas against the other women in the pool. She's clearly much bigger. He's clearly much bigger and has the attributes of a man because guess what? You know, he is a man. So if I put my daughter into sports, I want to know that she has a fighting chance to be competitive. If we are to change this, we need to ask some important questions. How does one advocate for equitable treatment while also adhering to the notion of biological difference? It's really not that hard. You start with the facts and you recognize them. You understand that men and women are different biologically. And the biggest difference probably is the fact that we are much stronger. We are much more of an athletic specimen just through evolution than women are. Women's evolution took a different route, more through childbearing, while men's evolution took one of a protector, one of a hunter-gatherer. And that's not to say that women aren't athletic or aren't really good at sports. I mean, there are women out there that could kick my ass in every single sport. It just means to say we don't deny reality, we accept reality, and because men and women are biologically different and separate, then we separate them. So it's that easy. You recognize reality and then you act accordingly. If separate is not equal in the case of schools, bathrooms, well, I think we should keep bathrooms separate, in my opinion. Restaurants or other social institutions, can separate ever truly be equal in the case of sports? Yes, I think it can, and for the reasons I just described. Would gender-based discrimination in sports be eradicated if sports were gender integrated? Well, by your definition, they would be. So, way to set that one up for yourself and knock it out of the park. But I don't think it would be. I think the gender-based discrimination is happening against the women by allowing someone like Lia Thomas to compete against them. That's where I think the gender-based discrimination is happening. But this person thinks the gender discrimination is the fact that we separate men and women in sports in the first place. The NCAA approved its first policy on the inclusion of trans athletes in collegiate athletics in 2011. The policy allowed trans female student athletes to compete on a women's team if they had been treated with testosterone suppression medication for at least 1 year. Lia Thomas could be on suppression medication for 10 years, and she's still going to hold an advantage over most women, because those are the facts. The most recent update in January aligns with the changes to the policies of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. That is crazy to me that the Olympics participates in this madness. And the International Olympic Committee, which placed the responsibility for eligibility criteria on an individual sport and its governing bodies. That's crazy. So that just basically means any school or organization that runs a sport, it's like the Olympics, it's on them and their institution to come up with the rules for if trans women compete, and if they do compete, how long they need to be on HRT. The NCAA was resistant to adopt USA Swimming's policy, which was among the most restrictive, requiring testosterone suppression for 36 months. Such changes would have been difficult to consider given collegiate swimmers were in the middle of their competitive season and weeks away from the NCAA championships. Moreover, both the IOC's and the NCAA's transgender athlete policies assert an athlete's right to participate in sports without discrimination and express a commitment to diversity, inclusion, and gender equity. Well, guess what? By allowing a biological man, Lia Thomas, to compete against those women, you are basically telling this mission statement to go fuck itself. The only way they could possibly be in line with their mission statement by allowing Lia Thomas in the swimming pool would be if they actually believed Lia Thomas was a biological woman. But they don't. They don't believe that. No one believes that. Those who oppose the inclusion of trans women in women's sports argue that trans women have an unfair competitive advantage, and that as a result, they will take away opportunities from cisgender athletes. Nope, we're just talking about women here. We're not talking about cisgender athletes. We're talking about strictly women. Women's sports is in danger here. Men's sports aren't in danger. We are not in fear of trans men coming over to men's sports and dominating. That's not going to happen. That's not the fear here. According to the NCAA, these assumptions are not well-founded. My ass. Moreover, there is a lack of scientific evidence, bullshit, that conclusively demonstrates a direct link between testosterone and athletic performance. Oh, is that right? There's no clear scientific link between testosterone and athletic performance? Well, then I have a question for you. Why the fuck is Lia Thomas on HRT? Why is Lia Thomas forced to go on testosterone replacement therapy if there's no clear link between testosterone and athletic performance? Athletic performance is influenced by a number of factors, including hormones, but also other things like coaching and training, psychological makeup of an athlete, access to resources and equipment, among others. Yes, all those things are factors and do matter. I agree. But let's take this as an example. This is probably one of the most extreme examples that is available. A high school boys soccer team beat the professional women's team that won the championship or whatever. I'm not a big soccer fan, and I don't pay much attention to it. But the best women's team in the world lost to a boys high school team. So obviously those women had far more coaching. The psychological makeup of them was probably better, given that they're professional athletes. Their access to equipment was much better. I mean, they had all the opportunities to be better than those boys, but guess what won out? The pure athleticism of the boys won out over the women. So yes, those things do matter, but one of the biggest factors is going to be just how athletic someone is. Even with testosterone replacement therapy, transgender women hold an advantage over women. Just pure size, lung size, heart size. It's not like your organs shrink. You know, yes, you are lowering testosterone, and testosterone is connected to athletics, but that is only one factor of our biology when it comes to why men are so much more athletic than women. it is not just testosterone. But again, we just read that they think there's no clear link between testosterone and athletics in the first place. So instead, they are rooted in societal and cultural definitions of what constitutes gender or what defines a woman. Well, biological sex is not a social construct, if that's what they're trying to say. Gender can exist on a spectrum. Like a man can be more feminine than other men, and some men can be more masculine than other men, but nothing changes their biological sex. Nothing changes what's between their legs. Such questions matter because sports are organized based on the belief of natural differences between men and women, and they are sex segregated as a result. Yet this ultimately leads to the discrimination of athletes like Thomas. Well, would you rather discriminate against Thomas, which I don't really think is discriminating because it's just preventing things from being unfair, but would you rather keep Thomas from competing against these women or be unfair to the entirety of the women's swimming team? Be unfair to one person or all the people? And someone might say, well, at least the women get to compete. Lia Thomas doesn't even get to compete if you were to do it your way. Well, yes, that's correct. Lia Thomas wouldn't be able to compete with women, but she could still compete with the men if she wanted to. If she so desired, she can compete against the men. She doesn't have to compete against women. And I'm completely fine with women trying to test themselves against men. If they want to come over to the men's teams and try to win and compete, that's absolutely fine. What is not allowed to happen is a man to go over to a woman's team and do the same thing. Because we know a man moving over to women's sports is unfair, where a woman moving over to man's sports is actually her testing herself. And we've known this for a long time. The Supreme Court unanimously decided in Brown v. Board of Education that separate is not equal, and segregation violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Despite this, sports have been able to operate under a separate but equal framework, upheld in part by the notion of biological difference between the sexes. Let me rephrase that. It's not by the notion, it's by the understanding of facts. The presumed physical inferiority of girls and women historically has justified, legitimated, and excused the unequal treatment of female athletes. The most recent example was the U.S. Soccer Federation legal arguments regarding the unequal pay between the men's and women's teams. The Federation claimed there were differences in speed and strength of the men's and women's teams, which partly explained the disparities in pay. The backlash was swift, leading to then-president of the Federation, Carlos Cardero, to issue an apology. Well, there's a tiny bit of truth to that. Men's athletics get more fans and get more attention because they're more athletic. It's more competitive. The shit they do is simply crazier. If you're watching the NBA, you might see a 360 dunk. If you're watching the WNBA, I'd be very surprised if you ever saw a 360 dunk. So the speed and athleticism of the parties involved does matter. But let's say for some reason women did outperform men, not in athletics, but in numbers, in actual eyeballs of people watching them and revenue being brought in. Then the women would be paid more. Also, not a lot of people know this, but the NBA has been keeping the WNBA afloat for a long time now. The WNBA doesn't actually make a profit. What would actually seem more unfair to me is if you paid the WNBA players the same as the NBA players when the WNBA players didn't bring in as much attention. That would seem more unfair than the way it is now. I think it's absolutely fine the way it is now. It's merit-based. If you bring in the audience, if you bring in the moolah, then you're going to get a cut of those profits. It's as simple as that. Change in sports doesn't happen overnight, nor is it linear. Major professional sports leagues like MLB and the NFL resisted racially integrating their player rosters. Well, I just think this is a complete straw man. I do not agree with the connection they're trying to draw here between criticism of Lia Thomas in the swimming pool and the racial segregation of black people. I don't think they're the same whatsoever. And just because this person thinks they're both rooted in bigotry doesn't mean that they're equal. There remains, though, a cultural investment in celebrating sports first, whether that be Robinson as the first black MLB player, the first openly gay active player in the NBA, the first non-binary U.S. athlete to participate in the Winter Olympics, or the first woman to score in a Power 5 college football game. Many of the athletes who became the first encounter resistance, backlash, and opposition, especially from those who have historically benefited from the status quo in sports. Well, I just don't think this person has demonstrated that these things are equatable. We thought that they shouldn't compete alongside white people, not because of athletics, but because of a perceived value of a human being. I don't think any less of Lia Thomas because she's transgender. Just don't compete in a swimming pool and make it unfair for the women. That's all I care about. What Lia Thomas does in her personal life is her own fucking business. Part of what makes the first stories so compelling is the resilience, determination, and love for the sport exhibited by these athletes and their motivation to break down barriers despite the naysayers. Well, I would say someone like Jackie Robinson experienced a lot more naysayers than Lia Thomas. Thomas is the first transgender athlete to win a Division I NCAA championship, deserves to be placed among the others first. She should be embraced in the history of progress that sports represent and recognized as the trailblazer that she is. You know what? I just absolutely disagree. I think it's unfair, and I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. I'm going to die on this hill. I think that this is the point where progress or perceived progress has gone too far. And now we think that something that is clearly unfair is actually equitable, which is ridiculous. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I will see you when I see you. All right, bye-bye now.